Today on 5 Minutes with an RCDD podcast, we're talking mentoring with BICSI. So come with us as we talk about this exciting subject.
Don't hang up that phone. We've found what you're looking for. Welcome to the 5 Minutes with RCDD podcast. Well, seeing how we're pulling Category 6A, the most powerful twisted pair in the world, you gotta ask yourself this one question. Did I pull 295 or 300 feet? Well, do you feel lucky? Do you, punk? In this podcast, you'll learn the differences between a 66 and 110 punch tool, the proper way to install a support cable, along with terminating and testing parameters. What exactly does RCDD stand for? Really can't do diddly? Or just some guy that's just sitting around in a chair making podcasts. So join us as we talk about the ever-changing world of telecommunications, from ISP to OSP, from copper to fiber, design to installation. Now send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications. Here's your host, Chuck Bowser, RCDD.
Today with us on 5 Minutes with an RCDD, we have a special guest, Ashley Wills. I came across Ashley at the BICSI virtual conference. I was in one of the groups, and I found out that they were doing something similar to what we're doing. Now, if you listen to our podcast, you know we do a mentor-mentee thing, but they're doing it as well. So I want to introduce Ashley to the podcast. Ashley, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the ICT industry?
So I'm Ashley Wills, and I currently work as an account manager for a low voltage contractor called Building Infrastructure Group out of Chantilly, Virginia. I have been in the industry for almost 13 years. I'm coming up on my 13th anniversary. 13 years ago, I started at Annixter as an inside sales rep, and that's how I got into the industry. I'd never really heard of it before. I didn't know what anything was, but got familiar really quick running the contractor desk for a lot of the large contractors here in Northern Virginia. And then one of my clients and I became good friends, and I started asking him questions as to where he was coming up with the numbers on the bills and materials he was sending me. And he kind of took me under his wing and became my first unofficial mentor in the industry. And I ended up getting my RCDD a couple of years later and going to work for him. And I worked for a contractor here in Northern Virginia for 4.5 years. Then I went to Graybar, and then I came to BIG. So I've since gotten my RCDD, my OSP, and most recently my DCDC.
Nice. So, I'm working towards my DCDC. And you may not know this about me, but I spent the majority of my career in your market. I worked for Custom Computer Cable, TCI, Hinkles McCoy, all your competitors.
I worked at CCCI.
Oh, so you know Courtney.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, Courtney. I was actually with Courtney when he first started his company way back in the early 80s.
Okay. Yes, that's where I went. I went from Annixter to CCCI, and then CCCI to Graybar, and now at BIG.
Very good. Well, I'm kind of glad to see that BICSI is doing this. I understand from the chat that they had a previous attempt, and I don't know what happened to it. We're not going to focus on the past today, but I've always felt that our industry falls short when it comes to giving people the skill sets to move forward. Because we, and when I say we, I mean we as an industry, not you or I, but as an industry,
right?
Technicians and foremen and project managers, they love to hold that information close to their chest because they don't want to tell anybody because they're afraid if they do, that person's going to take their job. We've never been good at this. That's why when I saw what you were doing, you probably caught my enthusiasm from the thing. I'm all in. I am all in. We do a mentoring program here, but it's just we only have 2 applicants a year because I'm only one person, right? So
right.
So tell us a little bit about this new effort that BICSI is doing with the mentee program.
So I got involved as a volunteer with BICSI about 7 years ago, and realized what you just said is that there's nobody you have to come across just the perfect person by happenstance and get them to kind of take you under their wing and hope it works out. So I wanted to create a more formal program that all BICSI members could have access to. And it took a lot of legwork and some heartfelt pleas to the BICSI board to express that this is something that we're really lacking. That's a low cost to no cost program for the association, but of great, great value and benefit to the membership. So we, myself and BICSI staff worked countless hours on coming up and scraping through other association mentorship programs, kind of coming up with something that could be not micromanaged, kind of let people guide themselves, but give them a couple talking points and set some standards. So we did the pilot program in 2019, and we had we started with 11 pairings, and we ended up with 8 because there were some people that just had too much on their plate and didn't understand the not the value, they didn't understand the demands of the program. Mm-hmm. So for the pilot program, we ended up having 8 completed mentorship pairings over a course of a year, which allowed us to go back to the board and say, look, this was successful. Let's open it up to all membership. And I think last year we had 22 mentee applications and 30 mentor applications. So we actually were able to pair 22 mentees with mentors all across the globe. And then we have a task, at the time we had a task force. It's now been formalized as a work group. That there are several of us that have been kind of involved with it from the get-go that manage the pairings, just check in quarterly, make sure the conversations are happening, see if there's something we can offer as far as more talking points, books to suggest that they perhaps read together. And so far we've had all 22 are having pretty successful pairings, even with COVID. But it's been huge to have Zoom and Teams and, even FaceTime. And some of our pairings that were in the pilot program actually renewed to continue their mentor relationship for a second year. And now some of our former mentees are looking forward to becoming mentors for this coming year's program.
And that's why I see the value out of this, is because I was fortunate enough that I had somebody take me under their wing, but unfortunately not until I was halfway through my career. And because of that, that's what drives me to be a mentor as well. I guess I've always kind of somewhat been, because I've always been I was the foreman who actually trained my guys, right? But that's not really formal mentor-mentee stuff, but I've always in it passing that along. And that's why that's one of the real big benefits. Did you find any pushback from BICSI to create this program?
I think once they found out that it wasn't going to be expensive or really staff demanding, it became a much easier sell. I think the biggest thing for them is their staff is so small and already so dedicated to other tasks. Adding another large new program rollout wouldn't have been feasible. So once we kind of made it very clear that no, this is still a volunteer-led program for the time being. As the program grows, we will need more staff support. But right now, it's really the task force or the work group that's managing all the relationships. We're the ones that receive all the applications, pair the applications together. So once we were able to reiterate that, no, it's not really going to cost BICSI anything other than it's only beneficial for BICSI because you can only apply for the mentorship program as a mentor or a mentee if you're a BICSI member. Right. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. So we really didn't get a lot of pushback. It was just more so somebody formalizing the request of, we need to do this. This is something our membership deserves. It's something our membership will absolutely use. And once we started talking about it, the interest was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I would argue with you and say it is a win-win-win-win scenario.
Right.
You got the mentor and the mentee; they're both winners. BICSI is the winner, and the industry's the winner.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't understand this about BICSI. because they think it's a nonprofit organization, they still have budgets they got to watch. They still have
Right.
constraints they got to work within.
They still have staff that has to get paid, and they still have, a building that they have to pay for. So it's definitely not for profit does not mean can't make money.
Right.
So they still have money that needs to come in to be able to maintain the association that we have all relied on for so many years.
Right.
And for sure, the whole point of the mentorship program is to formalize those relationships where someone is passing down information. And I try to reiterate to the mentees that no, your mentor is not going to teach you how to do your job, and they're not going to help you get a job, but they are going to help you navigate your career path and create a career map. Say, I'm an installer in the field today, but my goal is to become a lead technician, and then I want to become a foreman or a project manager, or maybe I want to become a designer. Maybe I want to own my own company someday. It's finding someone who's already kind of gone down that path and pairing them with you to help you plan out what your goals need to be. How can we set them that they can be measurable? And how do we work on them together? And even though the BICSI program is only for 1 year, that doesn't mean that you stop talking to that person in the year. You're still talking to them, checking in. Maybe you're not talking once a month. Maybe you're talking, once every 6 months just to keep tabs on each other. But the relationship never goes away. And so it really just helps people learn networking, get introductions to other people in the industry, and pass along that knowledge that, like you said, so many people have been holding so close to the vest for so long because they were afraid. But if you walk around any physical BICSI conference, you see that that's becoming a huge problem because the younger generations are not represented.
Right.
So we need to start passing that information along before the information is gone.
I just did an interview with another interesting content creator. It's called Low Voltage Nation. It's run by a guy named Blake. And I told him in that interview, I said, if you walk around the BICSI conference, it's a bunch of old white guys. I said, we need young people in this industry. We need diversity in this industry. Otherwise, it's going to die. One of the challenges I find in being a mentor-mentee, and let me know if you're seeing the same thing or how maybe BICSI program addresses this. And you kind of touched base on it just a little bit already. The expectation, right? So with some mentees go into it not understanding mentor-mentee relationships, and they really think that the mentor is going to be doing all the heavy lifting. That's not the job of a mentor. The mentor is to listen to what your goals are, see where you're at, and I think of a mentor kind of like railroad tracks, and the mentee is the train. They're just going to point you in the right direction. You still got to do the heavy lifting.
Right. And that's so what we do for the program is we have a program guide that gives definitions of what to expect as a mentor, what to expect as a mentee, what your requirements and what's expected of you, and then to kind of define what the relationship is, where it is a symbiotic relationship. No one person is doing all of the work. You need to be prepared to be open and honest and share your fears and your failures as well as your successes, because we don't learn from success alone, we learn from failure. That's the biggest teacher. So having a mentee that's very open and honest and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this part of my job. I feel like I'm stuck in a rut. Then you've got somebody who has most definitely been stuck in a rut at one point in their career that's going to be honest and open, but they're not going to just share that with you unless you ask the question. So it's really up to the mentee to set their expectations with the mentor as to what they're looking for out of the relationship. Say, I'm really interested in getting my RCDD. I'd like some help figuring out where to look for information, be a resource for that, or I'm looking at changing my career, or I'm looking at how to just better myself. So we, as the program, we hand out a program guide that teaches about SMART goals and has places to write down questions and set SMART goals together, talks about the definition of SMART goals. And then we have I guess it's not really a contract, but the last page is, this is what we're expecting out of each other. And they fill in the blanks. Like, we're going to talk 30 minutes twice a month, or we're going to talk an hour once a month. And then they have to report back. The mentor is responsible for reporting back to the task force work group. But that's really the only major thing that falls on the mentor versus the mentee. But it is definitely not on the shoulders of the mentor to teach the mentee. This is a huge opportunity for the younger generations, for the mentees, to glean information, but you have to go out and get it. But we're making it easier to do so now.
Right. You said one thing I want to kind of follow up on when you're talking about the goals. Do the goals in this mentor-mentee program that you're running, does it have to be within the BICSI realm? I mean, does the mentee say, no, I want an RCDD, or can just the mentee say, well, look, I just want to become better, so I can become the safety officer? Or is it just geared to general knowledge and growth?
It's obviously a BICSI program,
right.
But part of being a successful business person in any way, shape, or form in any career is just being generally well-rounded. So if you want to focus on time management, or if you want to focus on anything related to a career, then I think that falls into the scope of the mentorship program. It doesn't have to be you want to get your RCDD. It can be, I think I want to go into program management, or I think I want to go into engineering. I think I want to switch to sales. It could be anything within the industry, but it is more career focused, but does not have to be BICSI
Gotcha.
Credential focused.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's because that's going to be a concern I could see from some people outside of this thing looking in. They're going to say, well, that's just going to be BICSI trying to, get you to drive towards one of their certifications. And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with somebody getting this certification, because my career literally shifted into second gear when I got my RCDD. So yeah. Absolutely, you should obtain that. And an ancillary benefit of being a mentor that a lot of people overlook is you learn as well, sometimes as much as the mentee. And a lot of people don't understand it with a mentor-mentee type of relationship.
And I mean, that's why we say it's a symbiotic relationship. So the mentee is gaining insight and knowledge, based. Some of our mentors have 30, 45 years of experience, but some of our mentees know more about newer programs like Zoom and, social networking, whereas, our mentors know more about actual networking.
Right.
So it's, there's a lot of shared information, and we've started we send out a recommended book list that perhaps they can read together, form their own little mini book club to discuss. And it's just general. It's not necessarily just about ICT, but, like Atomic Habits is one that I like to recommend, or Radical Candor, that both the mentor and the mentee can gain just from reading, but then sharing their insight to the book. It's you see somebody else's point of view, and you see what different points in your career, what the struggles are. So I think it is definitely something that both the mentor and mentee get something out of. It's not one-sided in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fit in that category. I've been in the industry for 38 years, and I struggle with new stuff. I used to be, I was one of those guys who was an early adopter when I was a young guy. My first computer was a Radio Shack TRS-80. I remember paying $700 for this thing when I was 21 years old. And I remember my wife and my mother-in-law were like, why are you buying that thing, spending $700? And it advanced my career. But now I'm an old cable guy. I look at some of the stuff now, and like you mentioned it, Zoom. I was on probably 20 minutes before here trying to figure out how to get my OBS software to work with my Zoom software, and it just doesn't come natural to me. Cabling does. And that's why you mentioned the symbiotic relationship between the mentor and the mentee. I could absolutely see that being a benefit, all the way around. So if somebody's interested in participating as a mentor or mentee, what's the first steps they got to do to get into the program?
So we're actually in the process of getting all the email blasts, and I'm actually going to record an FAQ webinar to go along with the email blast. this time. So the email blast should be going out the first round by the end of the month, and then again in November, and then again mid-December. And the applications will be due on the 31st of December so that we can make the pairings and announce them at the winter conference. So basically keep an eye out for an email from BICSI with the email blast. Anyone who's also interested can email me at awills@bixi.org, and I can make sure that they're on the list. But if you're on BICSI's membership list, you will automatically get the emails. We'll also have them posted on the LinkedIn pages and Facebook pages, the links to the applications and information.
And I'll definitely make sure that when I see that, I'll put it on my LinkedIn page as well too, and give you some public publicity out there, because I think this is such a great thing. That's why I'm starting to see more and more of this. And I'm really, now we talk about people participating in the mentor mentee. What about in the backside? What about volunteers to help drive the program and stuff? Are you accepting applications for that?
Absolutely. So we are, I don't know if you know, but BICSI's been changing around a lot of the committees. And so the new committee that is over the mentorship work group is the Professional Development Committee, which is basically the old EAC, Education Advancement, and MOD, the Membership Outreach Development, which I was the chair of. We're now kind of combined, kind of changed. But so the Professional Development Committee is all about how to make BICSI better for our members. And one of the focuses is the mentorship group. So we are accepting applications for the mentorship group. I guess it's not a task force anymore, work group, which would help us define the program even better, help make the pairings, be in charge of monitoring the pairings. And then BICSI is always looking for volunteers, and that's another part of the program, is helping mentees get plugged into BICSI and where their focus is, and whether or not they want to write codes and standards, or whether or not they want to be, on the ethics committee, and certain things that they're best tailored to. We're trying to use the mentor's experience within the organization to help plug them in the right place. But there is, I would have to check, I haven't looked at the website lately, but there should be a link to apply to join the PDC, the Professional Development Committee. But once again, you can also email me if you have any questions about how to get more involved.
Yeah, definitely send me that link, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. That way people have access to it. And you kind of already anticipated my next question was, if somebody was interested in this, how are they going to find out more information? So you kind of already answered that. Is there anything about the program that maybe that I haven't asked you about that maybe you might want to make sure the message gets out there?
It's truly I always call it my BICSI baby. So since I started working on helping BICSI develop this mentorship program, I've actually had two real babies. So this is my BICSI baby. But it's something that I felt very passionately about even before I got involved with BICSI. It's something that I wished had been around, and I'm on the younger side of BICSI membership. And if somebody like me is saying, hey, I wish we had this when I started, then we should really work on having it. So it's something that I'm extremely passionate about. If you ask any of the board members, they'd be happy to tell you how passionate I am about it. It's something that we really need. And I think, like you said, you can look around at any BICSI conference and see what the population is, and that needs to change for a multitude of reasons. But we need to get the information while we can get the information, share it, not necessarily be so close to the vest anymore. We're not playing poker. We're trying to build the world's infrastructure. Let's share the information we can, because I do a lot of outreach here locally. And you go in to schools, high schools, junior colleges, and ask, does anybody know where the internet comes from? And being here in Northern Virginia, what at the last statistic was something like 70% of the world's internet traffic comes through Ashburn, Virginia. So you walk into a high school in Ashburn and, ask them how they're playing the app on their phone, and they're like, oh, just the internet. Well, how does that work? Yeah, magic. And granted, 13 years ago, I thought it was magic too. But so, it's something that I think a lot of young people rely on so heavily, but they don't know how it works. But once you can really get them engaged with how it works, it becomes even more interesting to them. So I thought having a mentorship program would be beneficial for everyone, including, the industry. I think we really need to get people involved, and we've been working tirelessly from different committee perspectives on how do we get high schools involved, how do we get junior colleges involved, how do we get colleges involved in learning more about BICSI, because there is no ICT degree.
Right.
So how do we change that perspective? We promote the trades, all of them, not just ours. Trades need to be elevated. So that's having, you can get an apprenticeship when you're an electrician, but so what can we do from our industry? So right now, the best option is a mentorship program, and maybe in a couple of years we can reevaluate creating an apprenticeship program if we see enough interest.
And don't discount the installation program stuff, the installation certificates and all that stuff, because the Joint Apprenticeship Training Council, that's for their low voltage guys, that's one of the major parts of the curriculum. And there's nothing wrong with being a tradesman. That's going to be a subject matter for a whole nother podcast, I guess. But, because we've been driving everybody, go get a college degree. And there's nothing wrong with getting a college degree, but the world needs electricians. The world needs low voltage people. The world needs plumbers.
Yep, absolutely. The world needs welders. The trades are viable and, can be quite lucrative careers. I do have a college degree, but I also pay $750 a month for it. So it's one of those things where I went to a technical high school where it was you go to college, and I have a degree in fashion design, and I design cabling systems. So I guess design is still in there.
That way you can make sure that they're complementary colors when they just choosing the cable color.
I make sure that my cable pathways are very clean lines, but so I think the trades in general need to be promoted, and then obviously our trade, is right in there with them.
Right. So is there a formal name for this program?
It's the BICSI mentorship program.
Okay, perfect. Now let me ask you one final question, and this is non-mentor mentee related. This is kind of still related to ICT, but it's not mentor mentee. As a woman in the industry, because as a trainer, when I'm training people, I would say maybe at best, maybe 10% of my students are women. What challenges did you face coming into the industry? And do you have any recommendations for any other women who want to jump into it? They're just kind of afraid, oh my God, that's a male-dominated world.
Kind
of caught you off guard with that one, didn't I?
So actually, it's funny. So when I took my RCDD test prep class, there were only 18 of us in the class. I was the only female, and I was the youngest by probably 15 years. And then when I took my OSP exam at the BICSI conference, where they had the whole giant ballroom set up for tests, and there must have been at least 200 people in there taking exams. And there had to be a female proctor because I was the only female in the room taking a test. So, yes, definitely, I'm used to being the only female in the room. For me, growing up, I have a brother who played baseball, so I always say I grew up with a baseball team. So I was used to being around mostly men. But I guess the best advice I could give is don't sell yourself short. Don't let anybody else sell you short. If you know just as much as they do, then make sure that they know that you know as much as they do. I've walked out onto job sites and been dismissed because I was a girl. And then I start talking. And so that it's one of those things, the proof is in the pudding. If you know what you know, they're going to figure it out one way or another. I oftentimes call people and, doing cold calls, and they don't want to take my call, and they'll say, oh, well, just send me an email. And as soon as I send an email and they see the credentials, they're like, oh, never mind. I'll talk to you now.
Right.
But you don't call and introduce yourself as, hi, I'm Ashley Wills, RCDD, OSP, DCDC. That's kind of awkward. So the proof is in the pudding. The Women in BICSI organization within BICSI is great. It's great for resources. I think we have over 280 members now in Women in BICSI, or participants. So it's a great group of women that face similar challenges, that try and share each other's experiences to help each other along. There's lots of really great books to read about being women in male-dominated industries, but basically the meat of it is, the proof is in the pudding. So prove your worth, and if somebody still doesn't see it, then move on.
That's what I was really glad to see in one of the chat rooms in the virtual conference was women in the industry, or women in BICSI. I can't remember the exact title of it. Yeah, and I was glad to see that, because we really do need a better perspective. We really do. One of my bosses that I worked for when I first moved to Florida was a lady who owned a company, and she was very direct, very straightforward. She knew a lot about the industry. She was what I would classify as somebody with a really strong personality. And unfortunately, that puts off some men. Some men get kind of,
Right.
But you're right. Your reputation and how you conduct yourself, once you get your foot in that door, I think the industry's getting better at accepting people who aren't the norm.
I agree. I mean, we have our first female president-elect for BICSI is a woman. So
Yep.
Carol Oliver, who's a huge proponent of the mentorship. She's one of our mentors, and she is very involved in Women in BICSI. Women in BICSI has a LinkedIn page as well. If anybody's interested in looking into that, they're very active. So.
And she's done a really good job with getting herself out there. I mean, for years. I mean, she's been writing articles for Cable Installation and Maintenance Magazine. She's doing BICSI Trade Magazine articles. She's held several offices. I think she's a star in our industry. I think people need to pay attention.
She's who I reached out to 7 years ago to get involved in volunteering with BICSI, and she lashed onto me and hasn't let me go since.
That could be a good thing, and that could be a bad thing, right? So
it's a good thing.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time, Ashley, and make sure you forward that information to us, and we'll put it in the show notes, and I'll also post it on my LinkedIn as well, so that way it helps get out a little bit more. Not that I've a huge following on LinkedIn, but I do have people that do watch my stuff. So, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
So that concludes today's podcast. I certainly hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I certainly hope that you look up BICSI and look up that mentoring program, because we only have bandwidth for just 2 people. They have a lot more bandwidth. So until next time, remember, we are connecting at the human level so we can connect the world. See you next time.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.